So noisy. Okay, let's do this. Hello, Afrocentric ones. Today we're taking a look at a man who foretold the coming of the colonizers, and his name was Chege wa Kibiru, otherwise known as Mugo wa Kibiru, and he lived in Kenya and he was from the Gikuyu tribe. Let's go. Long time ago, there lived in Gikuyu land a great medicine man known as Mugo or Moro wa Kibiru, and his national duty was to foretell future events and to advise the nation how to prepare for what was in store. We are told that one early morning, the prophet woke up, trembling and unable to speak. His body was covered with bruises. His wives, on seeing him, were very frightened and in a state of hysteria, not knowing what had happened to their husband, who went to bed in perfect health the previous evening. Horror-stricken, the family summoned the ceremonial elders to his side with a view to offer a sacrifice to Ngai, that is God, and to inquire what the great man had foreseen that had so frightened him. When the ceremonial elders arrived, a male goat was immediately slaughtered, and Mugo wa Kibiru was seated on the raw skin. The senior elder among the gathering took the blood of the animal, mixed it with oil, and then this mixture was poured on the head of the great seer as an anointment. At the same time, ritual songs were recited as supplication to Ngai. Soon, Kibiru regained his power of speech. With his usual prophetic voice, he began to narrate what he had experienced during the previous night. He told the elders that during his sleep, God had taken him away to an unknown land, and there Ngai had revealed to him what would happen to the Gikuyu people in the near future. On hearing this, he was horrified, and in his endeavor to persuade Ngai to avert the evil events coming to the Gikuyu, he was badly bruised and exhausted and could not do anything but obey Ngai's command to come back and tell the people what would happen. After a little pause, Mugo wa Kibiru continued his prophetic narrative. In a low and sad voice, he said that strangers would come to Gikuyu land from out of the big water. The color of their body would resemble that of a small, light-colored frog which lives in water. Their dress would resemble the wings of butterflies. That these strangers would carry magical sticks which would produce fire. That these sticks would be very much worse in killing than the poisoned arrows. The strangers, he said, would later bring an iron snake with as many legs as Monyongoro, that is the centipede. That this iron snake would spit fires and would stretch from the big water in the east to another big water in the west of the Gikuyu country. Further, he said that a big famine would come, and this would be the sign to show that the strangers with the iron snake were near at hand. He went on to say that when this came to pass, the Gikuyu as well as their neighbors would suffer greatly, that the nations would mingle with a merciless attitude towards each other, and the result would seem as though they were eating one another. He also said that sons and daughters would abuse their parents in a way unknown hitherto by the Gikuyu. Mugo wa Kibiru urged the people not to take arms against the coming strangers, that the result of such actions would be annihilation of the tribe, because the strangers would be able to kill the people from a far distance with their magical sticks, which spit deadly fires. The warriors were very angry when they heard this statement and said that they would take up arms and kill the iron snake and the strangers. But the great seer calmed them and told the warriors that the best thing would be to establish friendly relation with the coming strangers, because the spears and arrows would not be able to penetrate the iron snake, and therefore the warriors' attempt to fight the strangers and their snake would be futile. Mugo wa Kibiru advised the people that when the strangers arrived, it would be the best policy to treat them with courtesy mingled with suspicion. and above all to be careful not to bring them too close to their homesteads, for these strangers are full of evil deeds and would not hesitate to covet the Gikuyu homeland, and in the end would want to take everything from the Gikuyu. When the people heard what Mugo wa Kibiru had predicted, they were very disturbed and did not know what to do except wait and face the coming danger. Many moons afterwards, about 1890 or thereabout, the predicted danger began to appear, for sure enough, the strangers, dressed in clothes resembling the wings of butterflies, started to arrive in small groups. This was expected, for prior to their arrival, a terrible disease called Derana or Nyongo had broken out and destroyed a great number of Gikuyu cattle, as well as those of the neighboring tribes, the Masai and Wakamba. The incident was followed by a great famine, which also devastated thousands of the tribesmen. The first few Europeans who passed near the Gikuyu country were more or less harmless, for they passed through along the borderline of the country between the Gikuyu and Masai, or between the Wakamba and the Gikuyu. They were thus directed according to the prediction of the great medicine man. The Europeans with their caravans kept coming and going the same way from the coast to Lake Victoria and Uganda. In their upwards and downwards journeys, they traded with the Gikuyu with little or no conflict. At last, misled by Europeans, the Gikuyu thought that the Europeans with their caravans did not mean any harm and befriended them. Forgetting the words of Mugo wa Kibiru to treat the Europeans with courtesy, mingled with suspicion, and not to bring them near their homesteads, the Gikuyu began to welcome the Europeans in close proximity to their homesteads. At this stage, it is interesting to give a short narrative of how the Gikuyu came to lose their best lands. When the Europeans first came into Gikuyu land, the Gikuyu looked upon them as wanderers who had deserted from their homes and were lonely and in need of friends. The Gikuyu, in their natural generosity and hospitality, welcomed the wanderers and felt pity for them. As such, the cunning Europeans were allowed to pitch their tents and to have a temporary right of occupation on the land in the same category as those Gikuyu, Mohoi or Mudhami, who were given only cultivation or building rights. The Europeans were treated in this way in the belief that one day they would get tired of wandering and finally return to their own country. These early empire builders, knowing what they were after, played on the ignorance and sincere hospitable nature of the people. They agreed to the terms of a Mohoi or Mudhami and soon started to build small forts or camps, saying that the object of a station is to form a center for the purchase of food for caravans proceeding to Uganda, for Kikuyu was reported a country where food was extraordinarily abundant and cheap. The Gikuyu gave the Europeans building rights in places like Dagoretti, Fort Smith, and others, with no idea of the motives which were behind the caravans, for they thought that it was only a matter of trading and nothing else. Unfortunately, they did not realize that these places were used for the preliminary preparations for taking away their land from them. They established friendly relations with the colonizers, supplying them with food for their caravans. The belief that the Europeans were not going to live permanently in Africa was strengthened by the fact that none of them seemed to stay very long in one place. Therefore, reasoning from this, the Gikuyu naturally came to the conclusion that one day all the Europeans in Africa would pack up bag and baggage and return to their own country. in the same way as they came. It was a common saying among the Gikuyu. The saying was that there is no mortal thing or act that lives for eternity, and therefore the Europeans will, no doubt, eventually go back to their own country. This saying was taken up as a lamenting slogan and was sung in various songs, especially when the wanderers started to show their real motive for wandering, their real true colors. After this event, the Gikuyu, with bitterness in their hearts, realized that the strangers they had given hospitality to had planned to plunder, subjugate them by brute force. And sadly, this was a story that would replay itself not only in Kikuyu land, but in the whole country of Kenya, and indeed the entire continent of Africa. And therefore the predictions of Mugo wa Kibiru became fulfilled, and soon afterwards the Kenya-Uganda Railway, the Iron Snake, was completed.